This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Essays in Radical Empiricism by William James. Chapter 13. Controversy about Truth. William James, John E. Russell. The Journal of Philosophy, Psychology and Scientific Methods. Volume 4, Issue 11, May 23, 1907, pages 289 to 296. Discussion. Controversy about Truth. To the Editors of the Journal of Philosophy, Psychology and Scientific Methods. The pragmatistic conception of truth is so important that no amount of printer's ink spent upon it ought to be considered wasted. My exposition of it in No. 6 of this year's journal was sent back to me with copious critical annotations on its margins by Professor John E. Russell. This led to an exchange of letters between us, in which one issue at least got sharpened, and as that issue is probably the most prevalent stumbling block, I ask you, in the interest of clarifying the question, to print the correspondence as it was written. I subjoin our letters. Sincerely yours, William James. 1. Dear Russell, your notes bring out the exact point of misunderstanding and the exact difficulty with which pragmatism has to cope in making converts. You say, quote, events in the way of verification do not make an idea true, they only prove that it is true or was true. Unquote. There is the whole difference between us in a nutshell. The statement seems to mean that truth is a quality of the idea numerically distinct from the events which are its proof. But don't you then think that the said quality ought to be somehow definable as it is in and per se? I hoped for the definition as I read your comments, but in the end I found no new definition, only the old ones of agreement with reality and of thinking the reality as it is. Now what does agreement mean? Does it mean anything different from, or prior to, the copyings and leadings by which pragmatism explicates the word? These are perfectly well-defined relations of the idea to the reality or to the reality's associates and surroundings. And what does thinking the reality as it is mean unless it be either copying it, or leading straight up to it, or thinking it in its right surroundings, which last notion means terminating at places to which it, the reality, also leads? You speak of Leverrier's idea of Neptune being true before it had led him to verify it. Doubtless. But pray define its truth apart from those leadings and guidings. The word truth means just such leadings and guidings. Had his idea led him to point his telescope to a vacant part of the sky, it would have been untrue. Is untruth, then, also a resident and previous quality in ideas? Leading to that point, Leverrier's idea certainly was true. I can conceive no other kind of truth, and, of course, quite as true when only verifiable as it was after the verification. Even so the star was Neptune, both before and after its baptism, for in the star universe that star is all that Neptune ever can mean. In the case of Neptune, you don't separate the name from the fact found, and make it a cause thereof. You don't say the star was found at that point because it was Neptune. But in the case of the idea, you say it led to that point because it was true. But just as Neptune means nothing but the star, which at a certain moment is at that point, so true means nothing but the idea which, instead of leading you elsewhere, leads you thither. Otherwise, it's like raising a dispute about whether blood is red because it looks so, or looks so because it's red. You ought to insist on the latter formula, I call them equally correct. You may say either that the leading makes the idea true, or that it proves it true, for you are only talking of the same thing in different words. The leading both makes you call the idea true, and proves that you have called it so justly. Take another illustration. Does bread nourish us because it is food? Or is it food because it nourishes? Or, finally, are being food and nourishing only two ways of naming the same physiological events? And if this last view be correct here, why isn't it just as correct in the case of truth? The concrete facts denoted by the word truth are ideas that guide us towards certain termini. Other connotations of the word than these same guidings it is for you to show. If you can't, then we may say either that the ideas are true because they guide, or that they guide because they are true. To be true and to guide are precisely equivalent terms, of which you may make either you like the more primordial in significance. Otherwise, and this is the point which I emphasize and on which I insist, you must point out some substantive connotation in the word truth over and above such guiding processes. If you can do this, I surrender, but I don't see how you can do it. It seems to me that there is no other connotation, any more than there is in the case of Neptune. Neptune means the star that gets there, and true means the idea that gets there. Agreement, correspondence, thinking the object as it is, all resolve themselves into guidings, into getting there somehow. You argue as if, in spite of its getting there, an idea might still be false, unless the intrinsic epistemological virtue of being true were superadded. I wish you'd explain how. To me it couldn't be false under those circumstances. Revert to food. In this case we do have some additional connotations, a certain chemical structure, say, that explain the physiological events in advance. We know nothing of such connotations as yet, but we suppose they may some day be known. If the word food should connote primarily such chemical structure, and only secondarily digestions, absorptions, etc., then you might contend that bread nourishes because it is food, and isn't food because it nourishes. But you would still be on purely verbal ground, and even then you would have to define positively these newfangled connotations. Meanwhile, please observe that the word true has absolutely no such further connotations. It has no more of them than Neptune has. It denotes certain ideas, and it connotes their getting there. Here I must leave the matter. As a pragmatist, I can defy you to find any other practical meaning to the word truth than that it guides and gets us there. If, failing to do that, you nevertheless call our account an inadequate account of what you mean by truth, why then, again as a pragmatist, I can wash my hands of the whole controversy. It is trivial. It has no meaning. Yours, etc., William James.
2. Dear James, I think the issue between the intellectualist and the pragmatist narrows itself down to the question of the validity and the value of two distinctions. The first is the distinction between the ideas being true and the proof that the idea is true. The second distinction is that between a true idea and its instrumental function in leading, guiding behavior to desirable issues in experience. The intellectualist insists that these distinctions are valid and important to a right conception of knowledge. The pragmatist denies this. He contends that the terms true, truth, leading, guiding, getting there, etc. are different names for the same thing. That the term truth applied to an idea has the same function that the name Neptune, for instance, has when applied to a particular planetary body in the heavens. The pragmatist, after having made agreeing with reality, being as it is thought, etc., mean leading, guiding, coming into practical relation with, getting there, etc.,